The fifth programme in our series about everyday life since 1900 is about relationships. In Keeping It in the Family, Essex people talk about living together in and out of marriage and the post-war rise in divorce, experiences of illegitimate children, single parenthood, and changing attitudes to sex before marriage reflect key changes in the way we live.
They don't work at it today. They don't work at it. I mean, I've known several, sort of youngsters. I had a big wedding, been married 4 or 5 months, and they've split up. And I always say it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, isn't it?
When you got married, tell me what you said to your mum and why you said it.
Well, I just said, I'll be back home in 6 months' time. So she said, you what? I said, I'll be home in 6 months' time. I said, we'll have nothing to talk about. So she said, no, my girl, she said, you made your bed, you lie on it. And I said, now we've been married over 50 years.
We were married Easter Saturday, 1947. He got a job, so we thought, well, now we can get married, because you didn't go and live with anybody in those days.
Yes, well, I mean, what would have happened? Why was that the case? What was the attitude like?
Well, it was moral, you see. You didn't have sex until you were married. See, that was absolutely taboo. Anyone that did, well, I've known parents to throw their daughters out if they become pregnant before they were married. See, things were very strict in that way. And after all, I was brought up like that, so it didn't occur to us to do so. And I'm sure it didn't to my husband.
I think we were more innocent because we hadn't had we didn't see sex on the television or the radio. It was very much not a thing to mention. I think the rules probably were very strict on that. We didn't have television anyway. So it wasn't so blatantly put in front of us as something we ought to do. There wasn't a pressure on us. The accepted pre-marriage sex was merely to kiss. I've no doubt a lot more went on. In fact, I'm sure it was, because I don't believe that those things have really ever changed. But outwardly, what came over was that you didn't go very much further than kissing, because that's what your contemporaries did. And if they say to you, well, we went the whole way, and first of all, you want to know what the whole way is, and then you don't believe it. You know, we tend to think that is a very gentle area, a very innocent area, and outwardly, yes, it was, but probably not when you really came down to the truth.
Well, everyone was doing it anyway. I mean, sex before marriage. But actually, parents' reaction was very funny, and she'll kill me for saying this, but my mother-in-law, I used to stay with Murray because, bear in mind, I came from Kent. My husband lived in Essex, so I used to spend weekends at his house. All our friends were over here. He has an older brother, he was married, which was fine. But when I stayed in a separate bedroom, and we used to lots of sneaking around between bed, and I'm sure they knew. Well, I know they knew that we'd end up spending and then creep back into my bed before they woke up. It's frightening, isn't it? This is only 12 or 13 years ago. Oh, maybe 14 years ago. And my mum was the same. You weren't allowed to sleep in the same room. Once we were married, fine. You see, this is the old-fashioned bit of them coming out. But they knew we slept together. But not under their roof. It's very two-faced of them, really, I suppose. But on the face of it, we were sleeping in separate rooms, and we didn't sleep together. And they were happy because we were sleeping in separate rooms. And it was just so weird. So funny. Frankly, my parents got married to have sex. Sounds desperate these days, doesn't it? But yeah, I think they did, very much so. Oh, Absolutely. I mean, you were a fallen woman. Good grief. I mean, if it were known that you actually had sex, be he your future intended husband or otherwise, And I'm sure it's true to say that lots of people in the 50s got married to have sex.
I think it has gone too far. In some respects, I think that by living together, you can perhaps find out whether you are suited to each other, because sometimes sex is not enough. In fact, I don't think it is at any time, because you soon get tired of sex. I'm inclined to say now there's no such thing as love today. There's no tenderness, and sex wasn't the primary thing in marriage those days. You loved each other, you cared for one another, there was tenderness. This seems to me all they care about now is just sex, and it's a different attitude altogether. I say that my husband and I were very close all our lives. I mean, when he was very ill and before he died, he thanked me for what I'd done for him. That made everything worthwhile.
It's not the same. I mean, half of them don't get married, really, do they, today? I mean, it costs such a lot of money today to get married. I mean, you both got to have a decent job, before you can get married. I mean, my grandson, he's getting married this year, but he's been living with her, I suppose, over a year now, I think. But they've had to save hard to get married, and if you want a decent. I mean, you can just go to a register office. It wasn't like that in our day.
I read in the paper the other day, £11,000 to get married. Well, what, youngster has got that to spend on a wedding? I say good luck to them. If they're happy. I mean, my granddaughter, she's living in Scotland at the moment, and she's living with a partner. I don't condone it at all now.
My wife was previously married, and we had friendship, liaison, whatever it was, and she became pregnant. And at that time, there was still a feeling that you should be married when you have a child.
This is 1972.
1972, yes. It was an important act on our part, to have the child within wedlock, to use a rather old phrase. Obviously, those sort of things have disappeared to a large extent today, thank goodness. It was just something that we felt we should do to legitimise the child, because if you had a child outside of marriage, the child was termed illegitimate. We felt that we'd done the right thing at the end. I mean, the fact that the first child was born 11 hours after we were married didn't matter. It could have been 11 minutes or 10 minutes. It was, we'd beaten the barrier. We got inside the rules and regulations, and everything was fine. Like a lot of things, it seems, in my life, there was something slightly comic about it.
If we weren't to marry or be married when the twins were born, then there are forms we could fill in to denote that we have equal parental responsibility for the children and rights of access or whatever, which means you don't have to get married just for that. But for a family, I think it's much more important in a family. I mean, I was divorced and there was no children involved in this, but for a family, it can be quite important to have some sort of legal and some sort of ceremonial acknowledgement that you are openly dedicating your partnership on a long-term basis. Yeah, so when the birth does take place, I think that marriage wouldn't be very far away. I think we'd have to go, sod the paperwork, let's go ahead and do it. Because there are a lot of legalities that are easier if you're married with children than if you're not. As I'm studying and my girlfriend isn't in permanent work, especially with the children coming, and it means we have to be thinking, well, if we are to get married, then there's an expectation on me to be financially supportive, which I can't actually do, and we both have no intention of forcing the situation. It's kind of like marriage as an idea, as a convention, is great, but as it stands as paperwork for all the other kind of bureaucracy that exists if you're got a family, or if you're not working, or if you're a student, you have to make sure you don't actually shoot yourself in the foot.
I've helped unmarried mothers, their children adopted. Young girls that got into trouble came up and asked me, you know. I was very friendly with, I can say, well, he's dead now, so she was a solicitor, and he would find good homes, and they would go, we would arrange it, done properly. Wasn't allowed to take no money, not even not a bar of chocolate. My sister got into trouble, I mean. Mother was very poor, she couldn't afford to keep her and the baby, so she had to go into the workhouse to have the baby and then the baby adopted. That's what it was like in them days, because Romford Old Church Hospital was a workhouse, and I remember it as a workhouse. She never got over the shock of, you know, of losing her, but she did hear that it had died, little girl, it had died. No, I would not see them days back. You were shamed your family and everything.
When I was 17, I had my first son, so I was bringing up children. By the time I was 20, I had 2 children. Did use precautions, but obviously they failed, and that's why I ended up having to get married, as they termed it in those days. It was still a very unsociable thing to, you know, have a child out of wedlock. So if you ended up in that situation, the pressure was on you to marry. The alternatives were abortion, and in those days it was backstreet abortions, not legalised like you have now, which is not only putting, obviously, the baby's life at risk, but your own, which I wouldn't have contemplated, wouldn't think of that anyway. Or you had the mother and baby homes, where you would go so many weeks before you had your baby. You had your baby for a couple of weeks or so, and then it was put up for adoption. You had no choice. Your baby was taken away from you. And a lot of them young girls went to mother and baby homes, not realising what would actually happen, that their babies would actually be taken away. I mean, how terrible to never know where your child was, what was happening to them. You don't know, and you're wondering what they're like, what they're doing, and if they're happy and if they're healthy. It must be terrible.
Because my mother was Jewish and she had me illegitimately, and it's not like today. In them days it was awful to have a child out of wedlock. I was placed in a foster home. Nobody in my mother's family knew I existed until I was 6 months old. My mother got a phone call from the hospital because I was rushed to hospital with chest problems, and that was when my family found out about me. My mother apparently used to come on a Thursday to see me and take me out for the day. I remember the day she took me away for good. I do remember that. I remember screaming. I think I was 5. And she put me in Norwood, an orphanage. All I remember that is crying my heart out, because remember, I'd lived so happily for 5 years, and suddenly I was just dragged away into a strange place. At the time, she was living in Ilford with her sister's husband, and her mother. And apparently her sister wouldn't allow me in the house because of the circumstances of my birth. And it was only when her sister and her husband moved out to Gants Hill, I was allowed to go and live with her and her mother. And they were terrible years, because all my mother's bitterness she took out on me. I used to make out I had a father to people, because when you're a child and you see other happy families, you start making things up because you don't want to be the odd one. And I used to be, I suppose the word is envious, really, of children who had a mother and father, or sister and brother. No, I didn't feel wanted, because my mother, she turned to drink, and she used to say to me, "You're no good, just like your father." And that doesn't help you when you're a child. They say what goes around comes around, and I found it rather interesting because my mother's brother, who treated me like, oh, you wouldn't believe, looked down on me so much. He had 3 sons. Towards the end of his life, he got divorced. He ended up a drunk. The 3 boys, they all married out of their religion. 2 of them had to get married. The other one went astray for a while before he settled down. And his granddaughter now has just had a baby illegitimately, which I just find just unbelievable. You know, when you think about it. And the baby now that would have been his great-grandchild, the illegitimate one, the family idolise him. And I sit back and I think, my God, how things have changed in, 50 years.
When people had illegitimate children, when my mother was young, the people were put away or sent away or got out of the way because it was a terrible shame at the time. It was a disgrace. So I think that's why my mother was probably sent to work as a housekeeper with my father when her child was 3 months old. I did hear that she had had an affair with a soldier that was lodging with my mother at the time, with my grandparents at the time. I found recently, by talking to cousins, that he had had an affair with 3 cousins. My mother became pregnant with him. He had promised to marry her, and he skipped off and evidently went back to Scotland, and I never heard any more about it. I believe my grandfather tried to sue him for breach of promise, but don't hear about that these days, do you? Breach of promise would have meant when you got engaged, you promised to marry that person. And if you hopped it or didn't marry that person, then you could be taken to court for breach of promise.
Did your mother ever talk about having a child before she married your father?
No, she never talked about it. And in fact, I didn't know that she had had a child before she married my father. But we discovered a birth certificate in a drawer once, and it was of my sister with my mother's maiden name on it. And also, I think people that were illegitimate. I mean, these days the word is never used, is it? Illegitimacy was something then. But nowadays people have children and they're called one-parent families, aren't they?
It didn't cross your mind to be a single parent then? I suppose because in some respects you didn't have the support like a lot of young mothers have nowadays. And if some mother was bringing up a child or children on her own, she obviously was a woman of loose morals. I could have had a choice not to have married, to have had the child on my own. But that choice was never, you were never aware of that choice as an option because of the way you were brought up and because of the way social standing was. You were pressurised to marry. What's done's done. You can't keep on going on over it. It's happened, so therefore let's get on with it. And, you know, when I married, we lived with my parents till my son was 15 months old. I mean, that's how supportive they were till we got a council place.
Oh dear. Boy, that was a shock. Yeah, that was probably just one stupid night and one big shock. Kind of changed my life quite a lot, really. When I found out that I was going to have a baby, I had just accepted quite a good management position for a company in Bromley in Kent. So it kind of threw that out of the window, really. That was the biggest shock, firstly, was, oh, I've got to lose my job, which I know it does sound a little bit ridiculous, but it was my first management position and it was my first real chance, you know, at making it up the ladder. And I was like, yeah, excellent, go for it. And then I had to chuck it all in after 7 months. So I was kind of peeved about that, really. And then, of course, I had to cope with the fact that I was going to be a mother. It's quite stressful when you think about it. You get all excited at first and then, oh my God, I'm responsible for this. A few of the girls that I went to school with were absolutely horrified. A couple of them totally disgusted and have never spoken to me since, which is quite amazing, really. considering they're supposed to be Christian people who also went to the same Catholic school as I did. And yet another friend of mine was quite upset that I didn't tell her first. And my parents were just basically shocked, felt let down, but not as let down as I felt I'd let myself down. My parents and my friends that it really didn't bother really came round and was really there for me and really supportive. And the ones that decided to shun me, well, I don't need them anyway. It just seems to be a whole lot more accepted now. It's not such a big taboo that you've got to run off and hide somewhere and, you know, it's, oh dear, where's she gone? All the people from church are actually very supportive. The people that I thought would really shun me and be like, oh, God, you naughty girl, were the most supportive. My gran was actually quite upset initially, although she never told me that. She gave me a cuddle, she told me she still loved me, and she said, you know, it'll be all right. Everything turns out for the best. These things happen for a reason. She's just a great person, and a lot of people, her generation, were all exactly the same toward me. It was the younger ones I had the problem with. If I was to meet somebody in London or in a different part of the country, as soon as I say I'm a single mother and I'm from Basildon in Essex, it's like, oh right, yeah, social spongy, yeah, what's it like then? Get given a house, did you? Get this, get that. But you don't have to work for a living, and they just assume that I do that. It's not nice because that's how we're portrayed. It's not nice at all, and it makes me absolutely furious.
So when people find that out, are you at pains to say, oh yes, but it's not what you think?
Definitely. I make sure everybody knows that, you know, I went back to work when my son was 3 months old, part-time, and when he was 15 months old, I went back full-time, and I'll make sure they all know that I work full-time now. He goes to school, he's cared for, I've bought my own house, and I can afford to take him on nice holidays and look after him the way I want to, which is unfortunate that some single mothers that don't work, they can't. I know they're not all sponges, some of them actually are unable to go back to work, but I think really it's quite sad.
My aunt, she didn't get married, but the man who got her pregnant left her, so...
Did that matter, do you think?
No, not really. My aunt just coped with it because she still lives with her mum, my nan, and they get along well. When people were younger, in like the olden days, they seemed to make things work between their marriage, but since you could get a divorce, people like do it. Nowadays, my mum says that not a lot of people stay together.
So you think people should try harder?
Yeah, I think they should, because it's the kids' life as well, because if their mum and dad breaks up, it's going to ruin their life a bit, because 1 week they have to go see their mum, the next week they have to see their dad, and it's going to upset them.
We used to contrive things just to make a film. Then every November we would have the Scout Supper, and the Scout Supper was prepared, cooked and served by the Scouts for their mums and dads. Very nice sort of family affair. All the kids used to be there, and at the end I always used to show them our latest film. Now, when my grandchildren came along, my grandson Jack, he joined the Sea Scouts, and we went to several of their functions. And then one day, my daughter said, you ought to show them some of those day camp films. So I said, yes, okay. At the end of the evening, I sat with my daughter and son-in-law and her family, and Jane, my daughter, said, you see young Dennis Elliot, he's been married and divorced twice. That other young fella, he's been married and divorced once, and he's been married and divorced 3 times, and they are my daughter's age now, you know, in the sort of mid-40s. In my days, when I was in my mid-40s, I didn't know anybody who'd been divorced. And now, well, you only have to look at statistics. How many lone parents there are, single parents. It is really sad, I think, that parents don't think more of the harm they're causing both to their own kids and to society. It's much too easy, I think, the divorce.
divorce is quite easy procedure to go through. Both myself and my girlfriend are both divorced from marriages many years in the past. And I don't think we see it as the kind of naive attitude that we probably had the first time. You know, first time we got married, there is a naivety to it. There is an expectation that you have as you grow up that it is some sort of like accomplishment, some goal to reach towards. And once you get the other side of it, you realise it's not just a goal to reach towards. There are many more facets to it, and it can be a hindrance and of benefit.
I see my dad at least once a week, and he phones most nights, so I do have contact with him, but I don't want to feel out of order to my father, but I prefer it the way things are now. I do actually get on better with my dad now he's gone. I appreciate him more. I think he appreciates us more now he's not there. I've never thought about this before, but looking back, things did get more difficult towards the end, and like there'd be more times when they didn't speak to each other, and they'd rarely argue, but if they did argue, it wouldn't be very loud. They'd try not to make sure he didn't hear, but they'd never shout at each other and scream and throw dishes. They'd just fall out and then they wouldn't talk for ages. And you can always sense the atmosphere. Also, like, towards the first time they split up, my dad wouldn't sleep with my mum. Like, he'd come out for the evening all dressed in really warm clothes because he knew he'd be sleeping on a settee. And me and my mum used to joke about it. And she'd say, oh, he's got his pyjamas on now, and he'd have his sweater and shirt and jeans on and everything. It depends on each individual marriage, but I think people are splitting up more now because they won't accept unhappiness. This is not based on research or anything, but I think like in the olden days, people were prepared to put up with more, and if they're unhappy, they'd stick it through for the children. But it seems now people, if they're unhappy, they leave. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I'm not sure. But I mean, my mum really. There were times when she could have left my dad, but she stuck by him for us too. But once he had the affair, that was it.
When I was growing up as a teenager, you got to be about 18, 19, 20ish, and you got married. You know, if you weren't married by the time you were 22, you were certainly on the shelf. And then, you know, after 18 months, you had your first baby. And so I was married firstly when I was 18, not because I was in love with the chap, I was in love with the thought of being married, roses round the door and all this and that, which was a complete disaster. In those days, with the divorce laws, you had to be married 3 years before you could actually divorce. And during that 3 years, you had to be very careful that you didn't do anything. You know, if your husband was a guilty person, you couldn't go out with somebody. Otherwise, you know, there would be an element of blame and it would be harder to get the divorce. So I got my divorce, and then I thought, well, if I ever meet anybody else, I certainly won't get married. In fact, I only got married this time because I was told I was going to a wedding, and when I turned up I discovered it was mine. And in fact, we've got one wedding photo of my husband and myself outside Southend Registry Office, and me in my blue flares, simply because I thought I was going to someone else's wedding. We got married in the dinner hour, and my husband went back to work at Southend Hospital and I went back home. We had some fish and chips. He thought that was the right thing to do because we were going to have the first child.
There's so much I want to do, so much I want to see. I want to find out about myself, meet lots of people. I don't want to have the responsibility of having to think about someone else on the sort of level of marriage. I mean, I have a positive role model in my parents. I've had a happy marriage, long marriage, but it still scares me, the idea of getting married and actually thinking that you could spend your whole life with someone. I can't really imagine doing that. It's definitely different from the point of view of being female, that I wouldn't have had the chances I have now if I'd been born a generation or two ago. I wouldn't have had so many options, which is why I feel lucky living in the time I do, the country I do, that I have so many options as a woman, that I want to make the most of them, sort of make the most of myself as an individual. And because I see people around me having chances too, perhaps if I'd lived in a generation where all my friends were getting married at 19, then I would have felt the odd one out. I would have felt pressure to conform, but I don't. So you'd have had the little girl dream from a young age, which some of us still do anyway, of getting married, having a nice dress, a nice day, and you would have wanted it, and you would have wanted your marriage to be the best and your husband to be the best. But I imagine that's more how it was a couple of generations ago. Marriage is what you aimed at, and it certainly isn't now.
In part 5 of The Century Speaks, Keeping It in the Family, you heard the voices of Hayley Newton, Edith Hill, Isabel Johnson, Ivy Roberts, Carolyn Higgs, Doris Westgarth, Nellie Sims, Carol Matthews, Francis Tear, John Trustram, Will Wright, Mary Lickfold, Liz Clapp, Ken Eastlake, Martin Kerrin, Joan Syrett and Naomi Lloyd.